The flagship of Commander hung in space like a metal god surveying the galaxy below. Its sensors showed 3,000 worlds under Vex control, and today would add 30 more. The Dominion did not lose wars. The Dominion did not lose anything. From the observation deck, watched his fleet move into position around the Coalition territories. The warships were massive, sleek things built from materials that had been refined over centuries of conquest. Each one carried weapons that could burn a city from 1,000 miles away. His pilots had trained their entire lives for this moment. His generals had planned it for 20 years. The coalition of free worlds had lasted longer than most civilizations. They had somehow convinced 16 different alien species to band together against the Vex advance. For 3 years, they had held the line. Now the line was breaking. His tactical officer, a young Vex named, approached him with the morning report. Skin shimmered with the pale blue that marked his rank. He walked with the confident steps of someone who had never known defeat in his entire life. "Commander, Sector 7 has fallen to our forces," announced. "The Coalition defenses collapsed in 4 hours. Their ships are in full retreat toward the inner systems." Nodded, this was happening exactly as the calculations had predicted. The Vex had machines that could run 1,000,000 simulations at once. Not a single simulation suggested anything other than total victory. The probability of the Coalition winning was so small that Vex mathematics technically called it 0. "And the human response?" asked. He always asked. It was important to account for all variables, no matter how small. Made a dismissive gesture. "The humans, Commander, they are a primitive species on a backwater planet. Their entire fleet would be overwhelmed by a single one of our dreadnoughts. We have intercepted some transmissions from their communications relay stations, but they are so primitive that they still use radio waves." Radio waves, Commander. Technology that should have been obsolete for a species 10,000 years old. Had seen the human data in his files. Earth was a harsh world, covered mostly in water and storms. The humans had only recently discovered space travel. They had no allies except for the handful of Coalition diplomats who had made contact with them. The species had no unified government, no single military command structure. They were divided into dozens of nations, all suspicious of each other. "Continue the assault," ordered. "I want the inner systems in Coalition hands by the end of this week." That night stood alone on the observation deck, watching his fleets move like schools of fish through the black. He thought about something his father had told him long ago: victory becomes hollow when it meets no real resistance. But this was not a concern that troubled anymore. The Vex had conquered 17 civilizations. Each one had expected to win. Each one had failed. The humans would be no different. In the communications center, technicians monitored every signal leaving the Coalition space. They intercepted a transmission aimed at the edge of known space, a desperate message sent through a communications relay in human territory. The message was from someone named Admiral. She called herself a diplomat for the Coalition. "To all human command structures," the message began. "This is Admiral of the Coalition Defense Force. I am requesting immediate military assistance. The Vex Collective has launched a full assault on our territories. Our forces are being destroyed. If humans wish to remain free in this galaxy, now is the time to answer the call for aid." When the transmission reached Vex Command, it was forwarded to with a notation. Probability of human response was less than 5%. Most likely, the humans would ignore the call. If they did respond, their forces would be too far away to matter. Either way, it was not a factor worth considering. Filed away the message and turned his attention to more important matters. There were 30 more Coalition worlds to conquer. There were billions of alien beings who needed to understand that resistance was pointless. The Vex Dominion was the greatest military force in the galaxy, and nothing would change that. But in the quiet of his quarters, pulled up his database on human civilization. He read about their wars. He read about how they had fought each other for thousands of years before creating a unified government. He read about their history of recovery, how they had destroyed their own cities multiple times and each time built them back up, stronger than before. The database noted something interesting. Humans from Earth had a term for they called it they said this with pride, not shame. A world where survival meant daily struggle. A world that had shaped them into something hard and unbreakable. Closed the file. It did not matter. No amount of history could change the simple fact. The Vex had 3,000 ships. The humans had reported having only 17 capital vessels. The mathematics were absolute. He went to sleep that night satisfied. Tomorrow would bring more victories. The day after would bring more still. The Vex would continue their expansion until they had conquered every star in the galaxy. It was not pride that drove this belief. It was certainty. In the morning, would watch 14 coalition worlds fall. By afternoon, the coalition leadership would be preparing to abandon their capital system and retreat to their last stronghold. Would order the final assault. He would give the order to destroy the coalition's main fleet and be done with this war by. He did not know that at that same moment, 17 human warships were being loaded with the communications relay station orbited a small moon on the outer edges of human space. It was not an important station. Most humans did not even know it existed. The station's job was simple: receive signals from deep space and relay them back to Earth. Captain had been stationed there for 2 years. He was a tall man with dark hair that was starting to show gray at the temples. His uniform was plain blue with a silver insignia showing his rank. He had not expected to be here when the galaxy changed forever. Was reading a report about supply shipments when the alarm sounded. Not a drill alarm, the real alarm. His hands moved without thinking, pulling up the sensor data. A message was coming in from deep space encoded with coalition frequencies. The signal was strong. The signal was desperate. Admiral's face appeared on the screen. She looked tired. There was blood on her uniform. To all human command structures, this is Admiral of the Coalition Defense Force. I am requesting immediate military assistance. The Vex Collective has launched a full assault on our territories. Our forces are being destroyed. If humans wish to remain free in this galaxy, now is the time to answer the call for aid. His communications officer, a young woman named, looked at him. Her face was pale. Sir, what do we do? Do we send this to Earth Command? That will take 3 weeks to reach them, and the response will take another 3 weeks to come back. Did not answer immediately. He was thinking about something Admiral had told him during her last visit to Earth 2 years ago. She had said that humans made decisions differently than other species. She had said that humans understood something that most aliens did not, that waiting for perfect information was another way of accepting defeat. Reached for the communications panel and opened a direct line to Earth Defense Fleet Headquarters. His hands were steady. His voice was calm. This is Captain. I am requesting immediate activation of all deep space combat vessels. We have a coalition distress call. Coalition forces are being destroyed by Vex forces. I am sending the message now. I recommend immediate deployment of all available military ships at maximum speed to coalition space. There was a long silence. Then a response came back. It was from Admiral David, the head of Earth Defense Command. Captain, that order will take time to process. We need to brief the government. We need to coordinate with civilian leadership. This is a major military commitment. Understood what Admiral David was saying. It was the voice of caution. It was the voice of bureaucracy. It was the voice of a species that still thought like prey animals, always calculating the cost before taking action. Admiral said, and his voice was harder now, the Vex do not wait for responses. Every minute we delay, thousands of coalition fighters are dying. Thousands of civilians are being killed. We have built relationships with these people. Admiral has given everything to the human cause. Now she is asking us to do the same. Another pause. Then Admiral David spoke again and could hear something different in his voice. Understanding, determination. Activate the fleet, Captain. Send orders to all command centers. Every warship that can reach deep space is being deployed immediately. Tell we are coming. Within 1 hour, the orders had spread across Earth's military network. Within 2 hours, the first ships were powering up their engines. The crews had been trained for this, even if most of them had never believed it would happen. Earth's defense fleet was being called to war. In the docking bays, pilots walked toward their fighters with grim expressions. Engineers checked weapons systems and fuel lines with mechanical precision. Supply officers loaded ammunition and medical equipment. Nobody complained. Nobody asked why. They understood what was happening. Humanity had been isolated for so long that most people had forgotten what it meant to have allies. They had forgotten that sometimes you had to stand up and fight for something that mattered, but something deep in human nature responded to the call. It was the same thing that had made them survive on their harsh. It was the willingness to face impossible odds and try anyway. Captain watched the data stream across his console as ship after ship reported ready for departure. 20 capital vessels, 48 escort ships, hundreds of fighters, 1,000 pilots willing to fly into a war they had not started and might not survive. He thought about the Vex, calculating their certainties in their cold machines. The Vex believed that everything could be predicted. They believed that mathematics was absolute. They had never met a species that would make decisions based on something as simple as doing what was right. The human fleet began to move toward the edge of human space. They would travel faster than any ships had traveled before. They would push their engines past safe limits. They would lose some ships to the strain of the journey, but they would arrive. And when they arrived, the Vex would learn what it meant to face a species from a. The human fleet traveled faster than human ships had ever traveled. The engines screamed with the effort, pushing past safety limits that engineers had established decades before. In the first week of travel, 3 escort ships suffered critical failures and had to drop out of faster-than-light drive. The crews were alive, and that was all that mattered. Captain stood on the bridge of his flagship, the carrier USS Lincoln, and watched the stars stretch into lines of light. They were traveling through space that no human had ever seen before. The danger was extreme. The radiation levels in this region of space would have killed unshielded humans in seconds. The asteroid fields could destroy a ship without warning, but the human fleet did not slow down. Word spread through the coalition territories of the incoming human reinforcements. In coalition command centers, in refugee ships fleeing Vex forces, among civilian populations watching their worlds burn, a single fact became known: they were coming. The Vex noticed the human ships almost by accident. A Vex scout vessel encountered a human fighter that was moving faster than any fighter should move. The fighter was damaged, trailing coolant and fire, but it was still accelerating. The Vex pilot tried to intercept, but the human pilot flew directly into a radiation storm that should have killed him instantly. The scout pilot reported the incident to commander, listened and filed the report away. Humans were primitive. This was an anomaly, nothing more. But the anomalies kept happening. A human engineering team was spotted repairing a coalition ship using methods that no Vex engineer would ever have tried. The repairs were crude. The repairs were dangerous. The repairs worked perfectly. Another human convoy was tracked moving through asteroid fields at speeds that should have been impossible. Somehow the human navigators were predicting asteroid movements by trajectory analysis alone, without using the advanced sensor systems the Vex relied on. The reports kept coming. Human pilots were volunteering for missions with zero probability of survival. A human soldier had flown a crippled fighter directly into a Vex weapons platform, destroying it and saving 3 coalition medical ships. The soldier had ejected at the last second and been rescued, but the willingness to sacrifice everything for the mission baffled Vex analysts. In Vex Strategic Command, a young intelligence officer named Vex 7 began compiling data about human history. She pulled historical records, translated documents from Earth's early internet, and reviewed videos of human conflicts. What she found troubled her. "Commander," she reported to a senior Vex general, "human civilization has experienced constant warfare. They have fought global wars that killed billions of their own people. They have recovered from collapse multiple times. They have a cultural memory of survival through absolute commitment to victory." The general listened and dismissed her concerns. The mathematics still said the Vex would win. The numbers did not lie. But as the human fleet drew closer, the Vex began to feel something they had not felt in centuries: doubt. Received a report that the human fleet would arrive in 6 days. 6 days. It was not enough time to finish the campaign. It was not enough time to consolidate the territories he had conquered. But the Vex commander did not change his strategy. He could not allow doubt to slow his momentum. Instead, increased the intensity of his assault. He pushed his forces to attack harder, to take more territory, to eliminate coalition resistance faster. If he could finish before the humans arrived, then the humans would have nothing to fight for. They would turn back. But the coalition understood now that help was coming. They began to fight differently. They stopped trying to win individual battles. Instead, they focused on slowing the Vex advance. They abandoned worlds to save populations. They sacrificed ships to save civilians. They fought with the knowledge that they only needed to hold on for 6 more days. In human space, the fleet pushed forward. Pilots lived on stimulant drugs that kept them conscious but left them hollow. Engineers repaired ships that should have been destroyed. Supply officers stretched food rations to keep crews alive. One escort ship experienced a critical hull breach, and its crew chose to seal off the damaged section rather than abandon ship. 17 sailors died in that section, but the ship stayed in formation and continued the journey. The human fleet was not just traveling through space. It was traveling through the reputation it was building. Every Vex report that came in about human actions, every Vex analysis that tried to make sense of human behavior, every failed attempt to predict what humans would do next. All of it spread through coalition space like a story. They were coming. They were willing to cross impossible distances. They were willing to sacrifice anything to answer the call. By the time the human fleet reached coalition space, the Vex commander had already begun to feel that the Vex were attacking the coalition's last stronghold when the sensors detected the incoming human fleet. The alarms went off just as commander was preparing to order the final assault that would crush the coalition's main defensive line. The human ships emerged from faster-than-light drive in perfect formation. Captain's flagship led the charge, weapons systems already firing. The 17 capital vessels moved like a trained unit, each one taking up a defensive position around the coalition's damaged warships. The first Vex ship to engage a human capital vessel was destroyed in 11 minutes. The battle became chaos. Human pilots flew their fighters in patterns that Vex tactical computers could not predict. The humans used coordinated attacks that made no sense mathematically. They would sacrifice one fighter to create an opening for another, accepting individual losses to achieve tactical gains. The Vex preferred to minimize loss at all times, moving carefully, calculating every move. The humans moved like they were willing to die. Within the first hour, the Vex lost 18 ships. Within 2 hours, they lost 30 more. The human pilots were not better trained. Their ships were not superior, but they fought with a ferocity that burned through all logical calculation. The coalition's medical ships, which had been abandoned moments before the humans arrived, suddenly found themselves with protection. Human engineers fought alongside coalition mechanics to repair weapons systems that had been damaged. When a coalition hospital ship was threatened by a Vex fighter, a human pilot flew his damaged vessel directly into the fighter's path, taking hits that shattered his hull but saving the hospital ship. The pilot ejected and was rescued by a coalition recovery team. He walked onto the rescue ship bleeding from a wound in his shoulder, and the first thing he asked was where he could get another fighter. In the battle's center, where the heaviest fighting occurred, human soldiers boarded 3 Vex ships that had been damaged by human fire. The soldiers knew this was suicide. The Vex had superior strength, superior training, superior numbers, but the soldiers entered the Vex ships anyway. The fighting inside the Vex vessels lasted hours. Human soldiers fought with weapons and with tools and with their bare hands. They used the Vex ships against the Vex, learning systems as they fought, adapting to new environments in real time. When a human soldier fell, another took his place. The Vex maintained perfect military discipline. The humans fought like they had nothing left to lose. When the 3 Vex ships were secured, 17 coalition worlds were saved from immediate destruction. Commander watched the battle from his flagship's observation deck, and for the first time in his life, he understood that his victory was not guaranteed. He had calculated wrong, not in the mathematics of ship counts and weapons yields, in the human element, in the thing that separated a species that acted from pure logic from a species that acted from will and determination, and something that the Vex did not even have a word for. The Vex began to fall back, not in panic, in order. The retreat was organized, controlled, but it was still a retreat. As human ships advanced, they did not pursue the Vex into open space. Instead, they formed a defensive shell around the coalition territories, cutting off Vex access to the inner systems. The message was clear: you can leave or you can die. There is no third option. The human casualties were high. 8 capital ships were damaged beyond immediate repair. 3 were destroyed completely. 47 fighters were lost. 212 human soldiers and sailors were dead, but the Vex assault had been stopped. When the final Vex ship jumped to faster-than-light drive and disappeared from the battle zone, a cheer went up from the human fleet. It was a sound of exhaustion and pain and triumph mixed together. Captain, still standing on the bridge of the USS Lincoln, received a message from Admiral. Her face appeared on his screen, and for the first time since the battle began, she was smiling. "Thank you," she said simply. "You came, you answered the call." thought about the human sailors who had died in the vacuum of space. He thought about the pilots who would never fly another mission. He thought about the soldiers who had given everything on alien ships in the depths of space. "We had to," he said. "You would have done the same for us." The days after the battle were spent in recovery. Human and coalition forces worked together to repair damaged ships, treat wounded soldiers, and organize supply lines. The human fleet had sacrificed heavily to win the battle, but they had won it. The Vex had retreated. But the war was not over. Commander sat in his quarters aboard his flagship, analyzing the battle in detail. Every calculation that had failed, every prediction that had been wrong, every assumption that the Vex had made about humans that had proven false. His intelligence officer, Vex 7, stood before him with additional data. "Commander, the human casualties were approximately 200. They lost 3 capital vessels. They are still operational and prepared to continue fighting." Nodded, "They have shown us something we did not expect, but the mathematical advantage is still ours. We still have superior numbers." "Yes, Commander, but the humans do not calculate like we do. They are willing to lose ships and soldiers to achieve objectives. They do not minimize losses. They accept losses as part of victory." Stood and walked to the observation window. He could see the coalition space below, damaged but alive. He could see the human ships in defensive positions, ready to fight again if necessary. "If we continue this war," he said slowly, "the humans will keep coming. More ships will arrive. More soldiers will volunteer. They will keep fighting until we win or until we stop fighting. They do not have a threshold where they decide the cost is too high." "That is correct, Commander." Made a decision. It was the hardest decision of his life. He composed a message to Admiral, transmitted through neutral channels with a white flag of truce. The message was short. "I request cessation of hostilities and a formal negotiation between our command structures. I am prepared to discuss withdrawal of Vex forces from coalition space." When Admiral received the message, she forwarded it immediately to Captain, read it once and then smiled. He had known this would happen. The Vex had been defeated not by superior weapons or numbers, but by the simple fact that humans would not accept defeat. The negotiation took place on a neutral station, midway between Vex and coalition space. Admiral and Captain represented the coalition. Commander represented the Vex. The Vex commander entered the conference room and looked at the 2 humans. He had expected them to look like victors. Instead, they looked like soldiers who had been pushed to the absolute limit of endurance. They were also still willing to keep going. "I am withdrawing my forces from coalition space," announced. "I am prepared to sign a formal agreement recognizing coalition independence. I am also prepared to pay reparations to damaged coalition worlds." Admiral listened carefully. "And why are you making this decision, Commander?" Was quiet for a long moment. Then he answered with complete honesty. "Because I have realized that your species operates on a principle that we Vex do not understand. You are willing to accept infinite losses to achieve your objectives. You value the things you fight for more than you value the mathematics of survival. I cannot defeat an enemy that fights that way." Captain leaned forward. "That is what being human means," he said simply. "We come from a world that tried to break us and we refused to break. Now we stand with our allies and we will not break for anyone." The negotiations lasted 3 days. By the end, an agreement was signed. The Vex would withdraw from coalition space. The coalition would grant the Vex access to certain trading routes. Neither side had won completely, but the war had ended. As Captain left the negotiation station, he received word that the coalition had formally extended an invitation for humanity to join as an equal member. Earth was no longer an isolated species on a forgotten. Earth was a galactic power. The news spread through human space, and it changed everything. Young people who had once thought of the galaxy as a distant dream now saw it as a place where humans could go, could fight, could build something. The age of human isolation was over. In his quarters, Captain thought about the soldiers who had died in the vacuum of space. They had answered a call for help from people they barely knew. They had fought for a principle that the Vex could never quite understand, that some things are worth dying for. The galaxy had changed the day the human fleet arrived, and the galaxy would never be the same again. They had proven themselves, not through perfect strategy or advanced technology, but through sheer willingness to do whatever was necessary to protect those who needed protection. That was all that ever really mattered. Weight of something new, it was not fear. Vex did not experience fear, but it was something close to it, something that told him the future was no longer certain. Learn that there were some things that could not be calculated, some things that could not be defeated by superior numbers or better technology. They would learn that humans were not as easy to break as they had assumed. And fuel. He did not know that human pilots were walking toward their ships with expressions that showed they understood they might not return. He did not know that humans had a way of answering calls for help that no calculation could predict. The commander slept, and the galaxy turned toward a future that even the Vex machines could not foresee.